Hey there, Banditos! Welcome to the second to last episode of the Dollar Bin Bandits for the year 2025. It is the holiday season, and guess what? We have a gift for you, and it is my interview with Mr. Geof Darrow. Geof has a new hardcover collection of his Shaolin Cowboy work coming out in early January from Dark Horse. It's called The Shaolin Cowboy, Beginning of the End Results, 21 years of blood, sweat, and chainsaws. It's a massive title that befits a massive book. It includes all kinds of early collections of the Shaolin Cowboy comics. In fact, it includes primordial work on what was called the Bourbon Threat comics that Geof published with Mobius's outfit in France. And we get into everything Shaolin Cowboy and beyond. We talk a little bit about Hanna-Barbera, his earlier work at that animation studio, his collaborations with Frank Miller on Hard Boiled and The Big Guy and Rusty the Boy Robot. We talk about how he conceives of his pages, where he gets his ideas, how he stuffs so much detail into these pages that I can just go days and days staring at. So let's get to it. Let's talk to Mr. Geof Darrow. Monsieur Geof Darrow to the program. Geof, how are things across the sea?
It's more like my sewer is what if you're going to use it on me. But how are things in France? Are okay, I think. A government that changes prime minister every 3 weeks. And that big crime spree, which I thought was like the greatest criminal act I'd seen. I thought it was so hilarious. It's the exact opposite of Ocean's 11.
Yeah, no kidding.
The guys, well, one of the Kardashians, Kim Kardashian, got robbed in her hotel room.
Yes, I
And
remember
the
this a
guys that
few
did it
years
were
ago.
all these guys were like grandfathers or something. They all escaped on. They caught most of them, but it was just kind of yeah. It's it's so to me it was so French that thing. Huh? Who would have thought that someone would use a ladder to get up to a second floor and break in glass? That just seems so. Anyway.
Well, once every few years, it seems like France has to have a major crime that that captures
I,
the imagination.
yeah, that one that I could care less about. Those jewels, and it's like,
Yeah,
they're probably melted down by now.
we'll see.
They'll
But if we,
show up. They'll show up in that ballroom in the White House.
uh,
The gold, anyway.
stranger things have happened. I would not put
Yeah,
it past with everything that's happening.
yeah, yeah.
But we're here to talk. Oh, using the wrong hand, and now my pen is disappearing. Shaolin Cowboy, which you
Uh-oh.
can see behind me, which I'm sure you're familiar with. It's a
A
work
little
that you've
bit.
been, uh, you know, a big part of your output in the past 20 years. And
Yeah.
now, from what we understand, in December, Dark Horse is
Mhm.
going to be putting out a very longly subtitled book called The Shaolin Cowboy. You have the advanced copy there. Beginning of the End Results, dash, 21 years of blood, sweat, and chainsaws hardcover.
Yeah.
That's an amazing feat. But before we get to that, uh, by the format of our show, we are professionally obligated to ask our first question, as this is your first time on the show, which is, how did you first discover comics?
Uh, I really love dinosaurs, and when I saw and when I was a kid growing up, if you went into the corner drugstore, they had comic books. You went to the supermarket, they had comic books, and I always, if there was a dinosaur, I would buy it. I'd buy the comic on the cover, and that's the first ones that I started buying. But I really got into comics when I was at the dentist, and I hated going to the dentist. And I think it was 66, maybe 60, yeah, 66. And I went to my mom gave me a quarter, said, you can go get a comic book, maybe calm you down before you go in and get drill baby drill on my teeth. And I went over there, and all they had were things like Archie and, you know, the comics. They had one comic, and it was an annual. It was a Fantastic Four the wedding issue where Sue and Reed get married, and I bought it because I didn't know what it was, and but I bought it, and that was like, oh my God, that was like the epiphany for me because I had the whole Marvel universe in that thing, and there it was all drawn by Jack Kirby, who I didn't know who that was at that time, but I was like, wow, and then that's when I started buying comics, really seriously driving my parents crazy.
Well, I mean, what an amazing issue and what an amazing
Mhm.
story to sort of get in on. I can totally identify with that having been a story that really captures the imagination and sets you on the path you're on today.
Yeah, and I mean, they were like, I still remember the ads because they had ads in there for other Marvel comics, and they were like tiny little pictures of. I was like, oh, what's this? Oh, I've got to find this, and so I was like, kept bugging my mother. She'd give us a quarter a week to go and, well, she did grocery shopping, go and get a soda or something, some candy, and I spent my money on comic books. So then you could buy two of them for a quarter.
One follow-up, you mentioned Jack Kirby, and I often like to ask this because there are two different time periods. So you discover comics and you're into the stories and the characters and the color and the bombast. But at some point, you kind of realize, if you don't at the beginning, that there are people that are making these. There are people that are writing them, drawing them, lettering them, all that kind of stuff. Do you remember when you first figured out or first names that you really kind of recognized, or was it that first
Well,
time?
it was that first time because, I mean, to Marvel's credit, it said, scintillating dialogue from Stan Lee, and then it said, dynamic drawing Jack Kirby. The thing that mystified me was when it said inking by, I think that one was inked by Vince Colletta, and I didn't know what inking was. That was a bit of a mystery to me. And there was no, back then, there was no fan base or there was any way to find out. And eventually, I think there's a thing that came out called the Comic Buyer's Guide, and you could subscribe to it. And
Mm.
it was advertised in one of the Marvel comics, so I sent for it. And you could buy the back issues and da 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 da. And they started having information that kind of opened up the world of comics fandom to me. But up to that point, I had no idea. Other than I knew that a guy was drawing it, the inking. I thought, I guess I don't. The lettering I understood, but the inking was just
What does that mean?
put,
Yeah,
putting the on the press or something. I don't know.
right, right.
Being the genius that I am.
I mean, makes you were a kid. What did you know from inking?
Yeah. I said, what do I know now? Not about the same level. You know?
All right, so let's fast forward from Discovery of Comics. We're gonna go past your, or well, I guess some of this is in your early career, but we want to talk about Shaolin Cowboy and where it
Mhm.
came from. And can you tell us a little bit about kind of the genesis of Shaolin Cowboy? And I think it has something to do with these long out of print that's going to be in this package, these Bourbon Threat um, comics that you had first drawn.
Well, I as a kid growing up in the 50s and 60s, there were a lot of westerns on television. So I was a big, big western fan. I mean, you clicked over there, you're bound to hit a gunfight or a horse riding. Gosh, there were so many. And I remember when they just started dying off, or they think they were replaced by either cop shows or medical shows or medical dramas. But I like them until they discovered in the 70s Japanese films, and I saw on public broadcasting they showed um, the Seven Samurai, and I was like, at first I said, well, these guys are walking around in dresses. What the hell? Because I read a thing in the TV guide that said there's a great action thing, and I like, what the? But with about 5 minutes into it, I was like, oh my god, this thing is fantastic. So those were my big influences, and then also I was in for the big kung fu boom that happened in the 70s when they started. It started with, I think, Five Fingers of Death, which I didn't see, but Bruce Lee had heard about and I'd seen. I think that they called it the Chinese Connection. But yeah, yes. But still at that point, I was really crazy about the Japanese films. and Italian westerns. My big hero were like Clint Eastwood and then Lone Wolf and Cub, which I discovered in the 70s. Yeah.
Yeah, so you took these two kind of influential genres and
Yeah. I
decided
mean,
to kind of smush it together.
I just wanted to draw what I want. I just wanted to draw what I like to draw, and I wanted a thing that would allow me to do anything. I mean that's kind of ridiculous. I could have done that with anything, I guess. But I, like I said, well, I was trying to come up with a name. Well, originally, that was what became Bourbon Threat, which is he is he is the Shaolin Cowboy, kind of, sort of. I think
Yeah.
they're cousins. But this book that's coming out will not explain any of that. So
But it has
because
it has those early
it has
Bourbon
a
Threat
whole lot of it. I've
comics.
forgotten how much I gave him, and because it was originally printed in France first, because I had met Mobius and I had shown him my work, and he took me. I went to Paris, I went to France, and I went to stay with him in his house. And then he said, "Well, I'm going to Paris." He's living way out in the middle of nowhere, like I am now, and he would go into Paris quite often. And he said, "Well, I'll be in there. I'll take you. Come to the offices of Metal Hurlant, which is the originator of heavy metal. Metal Hurlant means screaming metal." And
Nice.
so I met him at the office, and he showed my stuff to the editor. His name was Anne Marie Schroff, and she said, "Yeah," and they printed it, but it won't be the well. You see the version that they had because I did it as a 4-page story, huge
Mhm.
pages. I mean, almost a full sheet of Strathmore each one, and it. And when they printed it in the States, they go, "We got to break this thing up. It's too dense." And so he turned it into like a 12 or 14-page story when it was printed then in a French edition. Then you'll see that, as well as I managed to run the original version, which is the 4-page thing. You'll see that in the comic as well, the
Can't
book.
wait to check that out.
Well, it's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy. I showed it to Archie Goodwin, and he liked it, but he said it was a lot of cosmic gobbledygook. I said, "Well, I guess you'd know. I mean, he's a hell of a
Well, do you
writer."
think that hit the mark? Is that what you were going for? A bunch of cosmic
No, no.
gobbledygook?
I mean, I see. I would have argued with him that the cosmic cube. What is that? I mean, none of it makes sense.
Right.
And it's. I mean, I always like people's level of acceptance in terms of fiction. Like, no, 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 no. Like me, like Pixar movies. The one I can't wrap my head around is Cars. Makes no sense to me at all.
Yeah.
I
The
think it's neat.
logistics
They're
of it.
really beautiful, but it's like, so who built these things originally, and who's
Right.
putting the gas into them? And they've got human buildings. Why do they need human buildings? And I don't know. It's funny because I that's my other than that anything goes as far as I'm concerned. But that one really, oddly enough, that
Yeah.
was my
I mean, I can see that. Once you're taking something that's so, I guess, mechanical and trying to have a fantasy around it sort of breaks down because there's so much logic behind the machine, the actual machines, the cars,
yeah.
that to not explain that is, you know,
I was thinking, what
bears
was it? Was it like Planet of the Apes and the cars? Once they all got built and they become sentient, they killed off all the human beings. But or do they
exactly.
keep them around, hidden somewhere in camps, and they come out and they have to fill up their tanks and drill for the oil and refine the petroleum. And I get it's like, geez, why are you wasting your time thinking about this stuff?
Well, so there was Bourbon Threat, which what
Yeah,
I call this is a way I sort of define it as like proto Shaolin Cowboy.
yeah.
So it wasn't just quite Shaolin Cowboy. It was gonna, like from primordial,
He
notion,
kind, he
I
kind of
guess.
is. I've told he's kind of a cousin, I think. But
So
when you see it, I don't know. You'll
yeah,
see it.
I'm sure we'll sort of make the connection.
But
But
I will say that in the Bourbon Threat one, it ties into my next Shaolin Cowboy book.
There you
So
go.
there you
More
go.
incentive to pick up this book to get the
Yeah,
real scoop.
yeah.
So how did we get from Bourbon Threat to Shaolin Cowboy, which was, I guess, more of an Americanized version? You had been working, I think, with the Wachowskis on the Matrix stuff, and they had their imprint of Burlyman, and so this is all kind of a stew of creativity
Well,
happening.
I went through because through Mobius, I met. I mean, I met him at a convention, but I really sort of met him when Mobius I was living in France and Mobius was in California, and I would come back once in a while in the summer to sort of get my you know taste of America. And and Jean Giraud Mobius Jean said, "Hey, you want to come over? Frank Miller's going to be here." And he had done Dark Knight, which I loved. I thought, Jesus. And I went over there, and when I got there, Mobius wasn't there. He was up doing God knows what, and so I was spent about an hour with Frank alone, and that's how we got. And then when I finally moved back to Los Angeles, we'd stayed in contact, and we would see each other. And he said, "Well, would you ever, do work with somebody else, do somebody else's story?" I said, "Well, you." He goes, "Would you?" "Yeah, yeah, yeah." He said, "Well, what did you want?" I said, "Well, I have to have lots of action." And so that's how Hardboiled came about, and then Big Guy, and then uh, I wanted to do a comic, another comic by myself, and I was really into, really, like I say, the westerns and samurai and kung fu movies, and just started drawing it. And at the time, I remember taking it to Dark Horse, and I'm showing it to him. It's one of those things where I was really kind of, because they're looking at it, and the person's kind of, I've seen this at conventions. They're looking at it and they're turning the pages and looking at and talking to somebody at the same time, and they're going back like this, like this. And they were kind of doing that with it. And I was like, no, they're really, they were willing to do it. They were going to do it. But
Yeah.
then I'd worked on the Matrix, and the Wachowskis wanted to do comics, and so they said, "You come and do it with us. We'll print it." And so I don't know if that explains it, but that's how we ended
Yeah.
up Early Man.
Was there any notion of bringing Frank into this since you guys had collaborated so
No, because
successfully?
no, I think he wanted to do more Big Guy actually, but I didn't want to do it because the next one he wanted to do was the Big Guy gets shrunk because he said, "Oh, I can see you drawing him. He's like fighting with a giant pencil and this and that." Like, I don't want to draw that. Geez, that's too easy. And I said, "Well, maybe, but I think I'm going to try something on my own." And he's very supportive, and so but I always tell this story. He said, but I told him it's kind of a Western with samurai, kung fu. And he said, whatever you do, don't put cowboy in the title. And of course, what does he know?
Right.
I
It takes advice
ignored
from
his
Frank
advice.
Miller.
But I mean, the Shaolin Cowboy, the title is very inspired by, I thought, one of the greatest titles in the history of comics is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I mean, you just hear that and you just want to see it, because I was at Hanna-Barbera when it came out. I was like, they were like, "Hey, did you read this comic, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle?" Holy jeepers. No. Why haven't I heard? This is just too crazy. And it's also a Japanese thing. The Japanese will put words together that don't sort of go together.
Hmm.
And that's what kind of inspired me as well. But the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, that was, yeah, there you go. Greatest title in the history of comics for my money.
For sure.
Yeah.
Um, it seems to have worked out, having
Yeah,
cowboy
for
in the
them.
title.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was, yeah. I don't.
Yes, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles has certainly worked out, probably
Yeah.
beyond the dreams of anybody that was involved in the first
Yeah.
series. Um, I'm wondering in looking at even in the background here and thinking about your um, early work at Hanna-Barbera is like, what do you sort of carry that with you, sort of the cartoon I don't know, approach or aesthetic in terms of like
Well, I don't know about the aesthetic, but the things that I learned when I was there, because I really was not very good at what I did at Hanna-Barbera. I was a character design, which was fortunate because when I got there, the industry was starting to really fall apart. So everything was being sent overseas. But the one thing that they always had to have control of was the design of the characters. And I had gotten a job at Hanna-Barbera on a sheer fluke because they used to give a class, a free class. It would teach you how to do in-betweens, if you know what that is. An in-between in animation is when you have key movements. Like if a guy throws a punch,
Hmm.
that's the end of it. That's the beginning. And other people would come in and do that, this,
Right.
that. And and so I went to this thing and I showed the guy my portfolio. And it was that the Empire Strikes Back had come out and had all this science fiction stuff because I really wanted to do science fiction at that point. Like, I think Star Wars is just like, holy cow, that was like the greatest thing. And he goes, did you do these? And I have these spaceships. He goes, did you do all these spaceships? I go, yeah. You didn't copy them? And I said, no. He goes, well, they're looking for someone upstairs to do science fiction. So spaceships, because Hanna-Barbera had sold all kinds of science fiction shows. They brought back Space Ghost, and they had Ace and the Space Hounds, and they had just Yogi Bear's Space Race and all this stuff. And so I got a job up there doing uh, mostly vehicles and things. I really wasn't very good at that either, but I eventually moved on. I did some other characters. I did a lot of Richie Rich, a lot of Richie Rich. I worked on the Super Friends, yeah. but what I learned was just what I didn't know because I didn't know how to turn a figure, and you have to draw in space, and
Right.
um, so I learned that there. Then that in perspective, I realized I really didn't have a good handle on perspective, and working there it really helped me. Even though it was just every day I dreaded going to work. I'm going to get yelled at again, and I always felt like such a loser while I was working there. I was always the last guy hired and the first guy let go because it was a very seasonal business. So it would start in May,
Yeah.
and by September, October, you'd be gone.
Huh.
But yeah, but so I handled that, and then I remember a thing, and it must have stuck in my head a lot more than I thought. I was in a meeting with they're trying to sell because the Japanese robot shows are really popular. So Hanna-Barbera was wanting to do a show, and they knew that I knew a lot about those Japanese robots because I used to collect them. And so they brought me in. And there was Alex Toth and a couple other artists. I just remember Toth being there. And they had me describe how these things work and to show how they unfolded and how they metamorphosized into other things. And 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 Joe Barbera gave this lesson about these. Well, I'm going to give you a lesson about how you tell a story. For instance, he goes, you got a plane. Not much of a story, not very funny. But you put a bear on that plane, and funny things are going to happen. And that was his entire talk. And I thought, after I go, God, that's such a crazy. After I realized, geez, I really stuck because it's true. You take something and put it into the out of place, all sorts of ideas open up. But that was something I got from Disney. That was the only time I was ever in a room with Joe Barbera, the head of Hanna-Barbera.
Well, that's a good lesson. I don't
Yeah,
know if you had that in mind when you're,
no,
working
no,
on
no.
things
But
like this.
it opened up that whole door of why not? Why can't you do this? You know,
Right.
which I
Which
think,
seems like something you've carried forward.
yeah. And the animation too is that the fact with animation is the lesson was that when you think you've pushed it as far as you can, you push it even further. You can push it like, an extreme because animation is a thing of extreme. So um, yeah, that was a good lesson. Because when I was there were so many amazing artists at Hanna Barbera. I always thought it never really showed up very well on the screen. I didn't think, but at that point they had Jack Kirby was coming in every week, and they had a lot of the Filipino artists working there, and then just the old time, a lot of guys from Disney that were character designers. They were just amazing. Just wow, could they draw? And yet, by the time it got on TV Saturday morning, it was like, and everybody was like, "Look, look over there." and then camera would shake, and they go, "That plane crashed," and they'd cut to a drawing of the plane already crashed.
Right.
Ah,
Well, I
money.
guess, yeah, you can't. Well, that's why they're comics, I think, because
Yeah,
you could put it all on the page. No one's telling you you can't, and we don't have
yeah.
enough money or time.
Not everybody does, but you can.
Well, I think you pretty much put it out there. You take this sort of cartoon approach
I
of,
think I.
let's get it to the extremes and put a lot, leave it out on the page as, in a different version of leave it out on the field,
Yeah, because I got
athletically.
like Frank Miller. He was just, you know, I don't think Dark Knight was just the best to me. It was just like wow, everything I liked and wow, wow. And Walter Simonson's another guy. I remember when he had that alien pick up the hammer and he turned into Thor. I thought, I never. Why didn't anybody ever think of that before? That if you could pick up that stick and you become Thor. It was like, wow. He turned him into a frog at one point. And there's another guy just an incredible imagination and an incredibly sweet man.
Yes, absolutely. We've had the great opportunity to speak with him
Uh,
before, and yes, very sweet, great stories,
yeah,
and
yeah,
yes, super imagination.
yeah.
Well, so let's talk about the original Shaolin Cowboy series, which is going to be part of this book. I'm curious when you're, and I think I know the answer, but I'd like to hear from you, is when you're, conceiving of the actual flow of the book, because you're a writer and artist on this, and we'll talk about Dave Stewart in a couple moments because I do want to talk about the colors. But are you conceiving it in imagery first, or are you conceiving it in a sort of textual story
What do you mean,
first?
like a script or?
Right, right. In sort of a script format, or are you really thinking like, here are the characters and scenarios and pictures I want to draw, and I'll figure out kind of a
How can I
narrative
shoehorn this? How can I
later?
shoehorn this into? Yeah, I've been accused of. I had one guy come up to me and go, "You have no. There's no story in what you do." I go, "Well, there's no story." And I go, well, the action is often the story. No, but I sort of. This is really odd, but I saw this movie by Robert Altman called Nashville, and it's a great movie. It's about the country music business, and there's no real story in the thing. It's just events that happen. It's like a day that goes by, and I always kind of draw these things as well. He gets up and things just happen to him because for me that's kind of life. I mean, as odd and crazy as this comic book is, he just kind of stumbles into things, and I mean, you don't know what's going to happen when you get up in the morning. You have to do if you had a job, this and that, but there's, extraneous things that you have no control over. And I got that from Mobius. He used to do this thing called the hermetic garage. And it was, I literally, I think he just went, well, I'm going to draw this, I'm going to draw this. And this is kind of how I approached it. The last one was, I had more of a story idea. But like the first one, I had absolutely no idea where it was going, except that he was going to fight a bunch of people. And then as I got into it, I thought it was boring. I thought I got to have something crazy happen. And then I had that dinosaur that comes up out of the earth, and then he was going to, no, there's no rhyme or reason to it. But I think it's fun.
It's extremely
Maybe
fun.
like the second one with the zombies. I don't know. I really like doing that thing. It was fun.
Uh, It's also, a visual, feast, which is, I think, what you're going for. And it looks like, as I said, you sort of leave it all out on the page. It looks like it would take a very long time for even each of the panels, let alone a page. What goes into kind of your approach to creating this sort of dense, these dense tableaus, which have, many different elements in them often.
Well, the elements I put in there because they're trying to make the drawing interesting and kind of its own thing as opposed to just another like in the zombie one. I think at the time I was in, where was I when I was doing that? Yeah, I was in Chicago, and the 7 year locusts were coming up, the cicadas. When they make that big
Yeah.
noise, and I loved those as a kid. I thought they were just the most fascinating insect. And so I thought I could have these zombies. And they got, if you look, you'll see there's like locusts, there's cicadas on them, and which was ridiculous because it's a waste of time. I waste a lot of time on stuff that stuff that just probably shouldn't be drawn anyway. I mean, who cares? I guess I do. I guess I
Yeah.
have to do it, but I
There's
like
sort
I
of,
just like drawing cicadas, and I mean, I said, well, they've been under the ground for a while, and they've laid, these things have laid eggs in them. And I always have this when I worked on the Matrix. They always liked because they said you always have a backstory for stuff. Because and I was designing the cockpit of their ship, the Nebuchadnezzar. I had like cup holders, which just made them laugh. So, well, they're up there, they're going to be up there drinking coffee or whatever, or, so they should, you never see cup holders in these spaceships, I mean, or that wasn't even a spaceship, but it was, so that was funny. I don't know if they put them in there or not, but that, so
I'll have
I
to go back and
always have
look.
an idea, even if there's no lot. I seem to have a logic to it, but I don't, probably not. I'm probably kidding myself.
Actually, it goes back to our discussion on cars, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Having some sort of like logic or story
yeah,
behind what's out there
yeah,
helps to ground it, I guess, in
yeah,
some way.
yeah, yeah. I always think if you draw something familiar and something fantastic, it grounds it. It just makes, like, if everything is fantastic, nothing is. But if you take something, which goes back to that bear on the plane thing, if you take something normal and you put something fantastic in it against the background of something normal, it looks even crazier. Like, and I think in that Shaolin Cowboy, especially when he gets into the city, there's a lot of stuff going on in there, in the backgrounds and things, and nobody seems to know people don't seem to notice, which is my sort of commentary on
Oh,
the
really?
state of.
I think when I'm reading, I'm taking in a lot of it. Like my eye is sort of moving around and not just sort of a one and done and moving on to the next panel. There's a lot of like interpanel observation that at least I'm going on. But every reader could be different in the way that every artist is
Yeah,
different.
I mean, I like to play with like signs in the background because there's
Yes.
not going to be not a lot of dialogue, and I'll come up with some crazy product, and maybe it'll get a laugh out of somebody. Uh,
The Simpsons is always good about those sort of visual gags in the
yeah,
background, while
yeah,
the main story is playing out.
yeah. Well in the hardboiled. I put Bart Simpson and Marge Simpson are in hardboiled,
Right.
and Matt Groening asked me about it, and because he thought I didn't like him. I go, no, I love him. That's why I put him in there because I think Bart was on a cross, and Marge was some robot that was serving cookies to that big fat owner of the Williford
Right.
company.
How long does a page take you to draw?
It depends. I mean, back then I was took me depending, 2 or 3 days sometimes. But I've gotten faster because once again, this is something that Mobius said to me. He said he spent like 40 years learning how to draw so he could forget about it. Now I can't completely forget about it, but I do find that you accumulate this certain knowledge, and it comes around easier. Then you can solve problems easier. That, like, as a, when I was starting, I was like, how do I do this? And I would avoid it. I remember there was a thing on the Matrix they wanted me to do, and I just couldn't wrap my head around it. And like a couple of years later, I realized, oh, this is how I should have done
That's yeah. I feel like I get that in conversations sometimes. This is what I should have said.
it. That's my life story.
All
Should
right.
have said that.
So I referenced Dave Stewart before, your
Yeah,
colorist on most, if not all, of the
except for the
modern
first one.
Shaolin
Yeah, the
Cowboy.
one in
Yeah.
the first one, it was like three different people. Yeah,
Uh,
they,
what
they
do you
kept.
think he brings to the table in terms of enhancing your art? I mean, the colors are
Oh, I just think,
fantastic.
yeah, that's that. He's that. I mean, he understands my drawing, and you know, I hardly ever have to go to him and say, Dave, that was part of a leg. That was part of you missed the headlight on the car. He just, I can count on my hands the number of times I've had said, well, that's part of his shirt, not shouldn't be flesh. He's really, really good. Yeah. Amazing, amazing guy. Yeah.
So probably a partner for at least the rest of Shaolin Cowboy, and
Mm,
maybe not.
yeah.
Okay.
I think well, I love Dave, and he it's just a lot of work. And
Yeah.
and I've always been waiting for the day when he would say, I can't do this anymore. And that day kind of arrived. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's sort of a scoop there. But I love him. I have another artist that I'm working with, and he's really good. It was hard. It was hard to say
I
goodbye
understand. All things
because we
must
were
come to an
friends as
end.
well as. But I understood. I understood exactly where he's coming from because even myself, I'm like, I can't do this. I don't think I can do this anymore. I mean, I'll always draw, but I don't know if I can do this because this latest one was just murder trying to get it done because I created a really tedious, hard problem to do, and it's all most of it is set in the city. And
Hmm.
I've gotten to the point where there are pages like that, but I generally I would leave heads and just nothing in the background. But I started putting backgrounds even in those. Like, oh Jesus, why the hell did I do that? But
Well, it sounds like a case of, painting yourself into a corner, and then it's
we're penciling
sometimes,
myself corner,
yeah,
and
penciling, right,
I make the
exactly.
mistake of drawing the whole thing first, and then having to ink it. The next one's 118 pages, and it was murder. All this, yeah.
So
But I'm
work,
almost done.
oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
So when you look back at something like what's going to be in this hardcover,
Mhm.
what do you see compared to what you're working on now? Do you see sort of simpler times, or
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, because I go, now that I could draw. That I could draw fast now. Uh, all of it. I look at it. I think this because I look at it's all learning, and I look at the bourbon thread stuff. And I go, oh, those rocks. I had no idea what I was doing, and I was guessing, and it's a lot of wasted lines and such. But and then when I get into Shaolin, I mean, there's still stuff in there that that I'll look, that wasn't so bad. You know, I mean, I just like, I mean, the first one, break my arm, pat myself on the back, was when he comes in and he's confronted by those guys that are waiting for him. And that's my Japanese moment. The whole, I love, like, I don't know if you've ever seen it in the Lone Wolf and Cubs movies, but, there's always one where he shows up at some point. He always ends up in a quarry somewhere, or, and all of a sudden he looks up and there's like in a Western, except instead of being Comanches up on you the ridge, it's like 100 samurai. It, those things had so much influence on me because it's so crazy. I mean, he
yeah.
fights like 100 guys, and he gets stabbed, and and then he's got that crazy machine gun in his baby cart, which I don't know how the hell that thing works, but it doesn't matter. But and that actor was so good at that. He's such a good martial artist. I mean, with the sword. That whole thing of him fighting like 1,000 guys. That's it. That I just can't do just him fighting one guy. So, the odds aren't, the odds have to be like overwhelming so that the audience will be kind of interested. I don't
How do you think the character and book has evolved since these early issues.
Not much. He looks a little different. He looks harsher than he was in the very first one, I think.
He's aged. He's been through some stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's all, baloney what I'm doing. I, I mean, I don't know. I really don't know anything about martial arts. I've done some Tai Chi, but I don't know much about Buddhism except the very basics. And I mean, just I mean, half the I have these monks in there that'll talk to him in his head all every once in a while, and all that is probably my influence from watching, Kung Fu, the TV show, and also watching the Jet Li and Shaw Brothers Shaolin films. But the whole, I guess I don't know if you can say this anymore. Kind of like fortune cookie kind of, you know. But I've been told that by people that I treat the material with respect, so that because I thought I'd get because I mean there's cultural appropriation and that kind of worried me at
Mm,
one point. Maybe they're going to come in and say I can't do this, and it really bothered me because I didn't want to do that. I thought it
right.
was offending people, but most of the people that I know in the Asian community, they're like, well, no, you don't make fun of it. It's just
They feel like it's I guess appropriate or respectful in
yeah,
some way.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's never doing anything stereotypical in terms of whatever. When you watch some of those, Jesus, some of those Hollywood films from the 30s and 40s, have you ever seen like the whole Fu Manchu character? Have you ever seen the Boris Karloff Fu Manchu character? Where I
Yeah.
think there's maybe two Asians in the entire film, and this actress Myrna Loy is playing his daughter, and it's just like, holy cow, yeah. I mean, and they're out in Los Angeles, so there were, Asian actors.
Right.
They're just like, oh, there are like two or three they'd go to, Key Luke and Benson Fong and Philip Ahn and Anna Mae Wong. She was, but and then that continued way into the '60s, even into the '60s. When they needed a woman, it would be Nancy Kwan. I don't know if you know who she is, but
I recognize the name, but I can't
beautiful,
picture her.
beautiful, beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful, young lady. She was in well, that Tarantino film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Hollywood. Yeah.
The Sharon Tate character is in the film that Nancy Kwan is in it. She has a fight with Nancy Kwan in the film. I don't know if it's called I don't know if it's the Silencers or whichever one it was. But whenever they needed someone that would be like an Oriental spy. Can you say Oriental? Maybe we're not supposed to say that anymore. Asian
Asian. Yeah.
spy. It would be um, Nancy Kwan.
Hmm. Well, there's, I think there's a lot more, cultural diversity now, so that
Yeah, yeah,
there are more obviously roles and stories being told from every different community and angle. So um, that's good, and it's good that I think from what you understand the community and that you're sensitive to it,
yeah.
not wanting to cross over any lines. I personally don't see any that you've crossed over, and this is such a fantastical world that it's I think almost somewhat beside the point, the sort of the race of the character or the cultural things that he gets into. But I think it's you've handled it well so far.
I got a step
You
on the
got a
landmark
stamp
there.
of approval from over here.
Yeah.
So another part of the subtitle is Blood, Sweat, and Chainsaws. And I have to ask about the chainsaws part because they've become sort of iconic. Where did that visual come from? Did it just kind of pop in like you wanted to?
My other great inspiration was Sam Raimi. And when I saw Evil
There
Dead
you go.
2, I was like, wow, there you go. That's it. I mean, it's just when he turns and looks at the camera and says groovy, I thought, wow, because at that point that word was such a horrible. It was like so corny because of the '70s, but
Right.
he made it cool again to sort of like say groovy. I mean, yeah, that's my inspiration was that, and I had done a in Hellboy. They wanted some Christmas pinups, and they said, and they asked, and Mike Mignola asked me to do one, and I drew the Shaolin Cowboy. It was probably the first time he appeared in print, and he's coming into town, and there's a giant Santa Claus and all these evil, but he's walking into town, and I came up with that idea to put two chainsaws on a staff, like a bow staff, and use it as a. I just thought it was like the goofiest idea. It's just so goofy. And then, I put it in the comic later on. I think somebody swiped it and put it in a video game. I think
The
one of
the
those
the
like
whole
Fallout or something like that. Because they actually
the,
came up to me and said, "Look, we put there." I go, yeah, thanks.
any credit,
Uh,
anything?
but I just thought, it was funny. I mean, the chainsaws kind of make a comeback in the next one, kind of, but it's not the same thing.
Okay. Well, I think it's very cool, and I'm glad you got it from Sam Raimi because I love those movies. So
And
a
then
good chainsaw.
I gave him, I was invited to his house, or to him, Robert Tappert, his producer's house. I ran into him in Los Angeles at a Best Buy, and he was aware of my work because he knew Frank Miller. And he said, "We're having a party. You want to come over? We're having John Woo." I was like, "Oh, geez, yeah." So my wife and I went over there, and he was, and I gave him and Robert the covers to Hard Boiled #3, which is the one where the guy's got a hole in his face. You can see through the hole in his head. And then on the back cover, you see that you shot somebody that was standing behind him on top of it. And I gave that to them as just a sort of thank you. And that
Wow.
ended up in The Quick and the Dead, the Western he made with DiCaprio. And yeah,
Yeah.
I was very, very flattered. Yeah.
At one point, read about some talk about an animated series, which I
Yeah.
think uh, was developed for a while and then
No, it
dissipated.
was in full production.
Oh, it was in full production.
Yeah,
Could you tell
I
me a
moved
little
to
bit of the story about that?
Well, I moved to Japan because the studio Madhouse Animation in Japan had great success with the Matrix, the Animatrix, and
Right.
they wanted to do a new project. And the Wachowskis, they came to him and said, "We want to do another animated film with you." He said, "Well, we think a good product would be the Shaolin Cowboy." And so I wrote a script. I had some help from Lana and Lily Wachowski, and it's probably the most complete thing I've ever written. And we were well into production. Whole entire thing was storyboarded, and they were doing animation and layouts and this and that. This is like in 2008. And then there was that big crash, the big grand recession,
Right.
and it was being produced by Madhouse, who would put their money into it, and then the Weinsteins, who were notoriously undependable, and they just said, "Well, we're not going to do it." And there was a big da 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 to do, and so they tried to find the financing to finish it, but they couldn't. And it was like 40% finished, and it was. I remember I'm going back a year or so later, and I went to their new offices, and I said, "Where?" They showed me where they have all these big shelves had all the Shaolin Cowboy stuff, and eventually all of it, I think, was thrown out. So there's a little clip. There's a little clip. You might be able to find it on YouTube. I may have posted a little bit of it because they did. They don't do pencil tests over there. They just go straight the ink and paint and color, and if there's a problem, then they fix it. But they don't because it costs money to do a pencil test. But
Nice.
they agree to do a little bit of film some of it, do a pencil test just so that we could try to sell it. But at the time, no one was putting money into that stuff, and it was a crazy thing. And so that was a great disappointment because it was not easy. It was not easy because I could understand them. They got this. I didn't, the Wachowskis wanted me to direct it, and I was like, I'm not a director. I said, well, we think you could do it. So if you think I can do it, I'll try. So I went over there, but there was a co-director, a Japanese co-director, Mizushima, really nice guy. Nobody told him he was co-directing this thing, so there was a little bit of friction. But he didn't know, and I didn't know because I didn't know that he didn't know that I was going to be there. So I was over there. It was not easy because it was very, difficult, especially when the thing started falling apart.
I can imagine that was, yeah,
Because
quite a difficult time.
I knew that they had no money to finish it, the American side, and Madhouse was going to put money into this thing, not knowing that, but I couldn't tell them that, and I felt very dishonest. I thought they should have been told because, that's those animation studios. They like hang by a thread.
Yeah.
And financial thread, and it was so. Yeah, it was a couple of years of my life. Just that's it.
Well, that's terrible. I assume that probably made you not want to do anything like that again, because I was going to ask if someone had, someone else in a different sort of scenario or project would want to animate Shaolin Cowboy.
Yeah, I would do it. I wouldn't be that involved. That wouldn't be that. I mean, there was one thing I used to argue with Frank Miller about was at one point he was really against movies. They're making Batman and this and that, and they're kind of raping the artists and the writers and and this and that. And I was like, well, comics, it's actually another revenue source. And, if I can sell this thing and somebody makes a movie of it and I make money that I can keep drawing comics, because that's what I want to do. I had never had any stars in my eyes about becoming some kind of a movie director. I mean, after The Matrix, I had people call me up and want to know if I would, direct this. It's like a movie. And I'd go, no. I said, I'm not a director. I always made I remember Lana Wachowski laughing. He said, why did you say that? I go, I don't know. Said, you could do it. I don't know how to, because you could do it. He said, you get yourself a good cinematographer and boom, you could do it. You go, But anyway, I mean, that's just so, gosh, just watching them do it, it was so hard.
Yeah, I can't imagine. It's
movie making is hard. I mean, they as they said to me, before we actually started making movies, we thought, how come they make so many bad movies? And he said, once they were in the business, they realized, how do any good movies ever get made? Because there's just so much. I remember when they were doing that, nobody believed in the Matrix. Nobody, they couldn't wrap their head around it. There were actors that came in, they couldn't wrap their head around it. Yeah. The head of Warner Brothers said basically, well, because we did this big book, Steve Scroce, Tony Catani, and a bunch of, we did all these presentation pieces, and they said it was like the best presentation they'd ever seen. And they still didn't understand it, but they thought, if you can do this for, I think at the time it was 40 or $50 million, we'll do it. And so they went off, and I think it went past that, but it paid off.
Yeah. I mean, famously, I remember Sean Connery, one of the many roles that he passed on, I think, was Morpheus, because he again didn't get it, quote unquote.
Well, that I never heard. I know that he was going to be in. They'd written a movie that was called Assassins, and they had written it, and someone rewrote it. And originally, the guy that was about an older assassin and a younger one. I think the younger one was Antonio Banderas, and the older one was supposed to be Sean Connery, and he had wanted to do it, but they made the big Hollywood mistake of announcing him doing it before they had him signed. And no, 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 no. You're like trying to force me into this thing, and he backed out.
Yeah.
No, they always wanted they originally they wanted Fishburne, and then they said no, he's not bankable. And then they wanted Samuel Jackson, and then Samuel they said, well, Samuel Jackson, he was, I think, just the racism. It's like, well, he had done this movie called The Long Goodbye with Gina
Yeah,
Davis.
Gina
It's a really
Davis.
great movie. It's crazy,
Yeah, I really like it. Yeah.
and it bombed. And so they're like, well, because his movies bomb. So they blamed it on him. And then I remember the Wachowski said, yeah, but he was in this one of those lawyer things with, I think, Matthew McConaughey. I can't remember what it was.
Yes.
And it was a big hit. And he said, yeah, but he
Yeah.
was in that. He goes, well, that was because of Matthew McConaughey. So he gets no credit for when it's a success.
Yeah.
He wouldn't get any success. And so they finally just said, okay, if you want Fishburne, you can have it. I mean, I love Fishburne. I mean, I thought,
Oh, he was fantastic.
yeah. I mean,
He's fantastic.
I liked him from Pee Wee's Playhouse. I thought he was so great as Cowboy
Yes.
Chris. I said that to him.
Yeah.
He said, I know this is probably gonna make you, but gosh, Pee Wee's Playhouse.
Did he
One of my
appreciate it,
favorites.
or was he like, I want
Oh
to?
yeah, no, he said, yeah. He goes, yeah, I like doing comedy. He didn't get to do much comedy.
Yeah. Yeah.
He did
Um,
Boys in the Hood and other stuff.
Another thing you said about the directing, it reminds me of the line in Ghostbusters, the original, where they say, when someone asks you if you're a god, you say yes.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So,
But I was always afraid, like, I've known, I guess, from working in, um, when I first started out, I was working in advertising, and if you lied about your skills, like, can you airbrush this or that, and if you can't do it, and I had friends that lied about stuff, and then they get fired, and I go, I never wanted to get fired because I couldn't do it. I mean, even The Matrix. I mean, when they sent me I asked them to send me the script because I wanted to see if I could do it. And I mean, if I was capable of bringing anything to it, be able to draw what they had written. And at the time, Joel Silver, the producer, goes, "Who the hell does this guy think he is? Blah 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 blah. I want to read the script." Blah, blah, blah. And the Wachowskis appreciate it because I don't want to take somebody's money. I've turned down jobs because I'm not appropriate. And
mhm.
I've run into that out there where people say yes to anything, and there's some things I know my limitations, and um, I'll call somebody else up and say, I was supposed to work on that Catwoman movie. They wanted me to do that, and I said, I'm not.
Ooh, dodged the bullet there.
Well, yeah, and I just said I'm not a sexy girl guy, and I gave them the name of someone who's really really good. Her name is Claire Wendling, and she got there. She went and worked on it. But God, I've never seen it except just bits and
I
pieces.
haven't seen it, but it's sort of a notorious
And they gave that
bomb. I'm sure
weird
no
thing.
fault through the artist's, rendering. That had
No,
nothing to do
no,
with it, of course.
they just look kind of goofy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they gave her that
Well,
that helmet that she had that made her head look really big. She looked like a bobblehead sometimes, which was a mistake. Such a beautiful woman.
yes, agreed. They did not quite nail
Do
the
her any favors. Yeah.
aesthetic. Yeah, we're doing agreed. Yes. If you have Halle Berry, you want to show Halle Berry.
Yeah.
I mean, they did the same thing to her in the X-Men films. I mean, you could see her face, so that was one
Yeah.
thing, but they had these series of just terrible wigs that again did her no favors, I think. But and also, the character development, of course. So anyway, as she landed on her feet, as I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway, before we come to a close, I did want to ask you. You've mentioned, Frank a number of times, and
Mhm.
I'm curious when you were moving from your work with Frank on Hard Boiled and Big Guy. Um, did you take any particular like lessons from those collaborations when you were working on the first like Shaolin Cowboys?
Uh, to be quite honest, I was so terrified of showing him anything, even hard boiled, because I thought, well, he'll just stop. And to his absolute credit, he was so nice to me. I wouldn't show him stuff for months, and then it was just like fait accompli kind of a thing. And he told me that he would, would get him the pages when I'd show him to him, and he'd just kind of like walk around the room, like, what the hell am I going to do with this? Because I kind of added things that weren't in the script because like, I don't know, I've told this story quite often. Was the first page was like Nixon is standing at the end of an alley, and there's bullets, and there's two dead guys at his feet. Now that drawing I did was accurate, but then I thought, well, we should see something else. And this goes back to my Japanese thing. And the next is a double page spread, and he's at the end of the alley, and there's bodies everywhere. And there's these cars with the machine guns coming out of the things and all that. And none of that was in the script. And then he crashes through the wall, and that wasn't in the script. And I had that weird sort of like they used to have what they call marathon dancing, I think, where in the 30s, that people were starving. They had these dance contests, and you'd have to stay. You dance with your partner, but you couldn't stop except to go to the bathroom. You couldn't sleep, and it was just basically watching people slowly pass out and die on that. It was just, they made a movie about it called "They Shoot Horses, Don't They?" And so I thought, well, what if it was in this case it was like people having sex in this arena, and if you kind of tantric sexy, if you climax too soon, there were those guys with the chainsaws where it would come and kill you. And I mean, all this is in my head. None of that is. I've never been explained. And then I had people watching it, and because Frank was, I had to explain to myself why he was fighting, why they're collecting tax. He was collecting taxes. What did they do that was so horrible that he's there, wiping all these guys out? So I came up with that, and I know Frank was like, "What the hell's he doing?" I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there. He was just like, "What's he thinking?" Like there's the big heavy guy Williford who's hooked up to some machine, and there's fetuses in there and Hershey bars and soda and stuff. They go, well, that's all being fed to him. He's on. He was very 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 patient with me.
Once
But
it's drawn, once it's drawn,
end of the economy, he was always trying to get me to draw faster. Yeah, do more. And I was like, well, yeah, but I can't. I'm not you, Frank. I can't. I didn't feel like I had the ability to draw something simple. I had to make it complicated so it looked like I was at least making an effort. I think, well, pretty crappy, but we'll give him an A for effort. Nothing else. So.
I mean, I don't. There's definitely looks like there's a lot of effort there, but it's also, worthwhile effort, at least in my opinion, and I think in a lot of others. So, Shaolin Cowboy, you've done 21 years of Shaolin Cowboy, and you've hinted that you're, at least in the latest issue, you're maybe finding some creative problems that are hard to extricate yourself from. But do you see yourself? How long do you see yourself continuing?
Just until I keel over. I mean, that's what I don't know what I would do. I sincerely drive my wife crazy. I don't know how to take a vacation anymore. I mean, I'll go places if I think I can get an inspiration out of there.
Yeah.
But I love going to Tokyo because that place always inspires me. But I like going out in the desert and looking at that stuff. But yeah, I want to, I hope I can do some more books. And I always think of like Will Eisner, who worked right up to the end, or Charles Schultz. God, what an ending for that guy. He dies on the day the last original Peanuts is printed. That is amazing to me. Wow. Pretty cool.
That is a closed circle, if there ever was one.
Yeah. So yeah, I always feel kind of bad because every once in a while I get someone on Facebook will say to me, I really like what you, but I wish you would try your hand at doing something else, another like another world or another this and that. And then I always feel like so. What you're basically telling me is you're fed up with Shaolin Cowboy. That makes me feel kind of bad. But I go, why do I care? I mean, I do. I get obviously, but I just want to.
I feel
I don't
like
know.
you've
Every
set
time I
up
think of,
I was
well,
just
you
going to
hit
say,
me.
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I feel like the Shaolin Cowboy world or universe is elastic and expansive enough that you could do a bunch of other,
Yeah,
different
but
kinds of stories.
yeah, I know. Like Mike has told me, say, I got to do one, like Shaolin Cowboy in space, and I have a story like that I wanted to do, and I've got one with, and if you've noticed in the comics, there's always like a giant, like a kaiju in the background. I have a kaiju story because I
Ooh.
love those movies. Yeah,
Yeah, you mentioned that before. Yeah, get to that one. That'll
yeah.
be an
But the
exciting
minute
one.
I think about it, God, it's like the idea I have is so complicated. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. Somebody, I'm not going to mention a name. Somebody really, really good director, really good. He said, I got an idea for a graphic novel, and then maybe like, and he sent it to me. And I go, geez, it was so complicated. I said, I could see myself going crazy doing this. And I just can't. I can't do that. I mean, if it's for myself, maybe, but but I just don't think I could, you know, because if you tell me there's an army or this or that, it's going to be an army or this or that. I'm not going to probably do, I still draw on paper. I don't, I couldn't like use the computer to like repeat
Right.
figures or,
Yeah.
because then the other thing is I look at it, I must have, what do you call it? I'm super anal. It's like, yeah, people will notice. Besides, this one should be smaller and the perspective would change so you wouldn't see, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're going to put your name on it, you want it to be the way you want it to be. And that,
Yeah,
makes sense, I think. Artistic integrity and all that.
yeah. Not that I have any integrity, but or artistry for that matter.
All right, so
But
we have the
but I can
hardcover.
draw. I can draw a lot. I
Go.
can draw a dog taking a poop. That I can do.
I mean, that'll get
Demonstrated
you
that time and time again.
that'll get you far.
Yeah, well, the kids,
It's a good foundation.
Yeah.
So the hardcover's coming out in December. And
It's the
you're work
21st anniversary, and it's coming out almost just about a week before
before
it's the
22nd.
22nd. I thought, and the
Yeah,
reason I did it, the reason it's the 21st is because it's actually last year would have been the 20th, and Dark Horse celebrated the number of characters anniversary, and I said, well, it's actually 20 years, and they were like, oh, we can. I said, it's October. I said, well, how are you going to do something before? And
right.
I just like, oh, well, they did it. And I said, well, why don't you put like the 20, just pick an odd number, 20, who celebrates 21 years of something? So they, okay, yeah, well, we'll do 20. And then what do? They turn around and it's coming out. I think it's funny at the same time. It comes out, a week before
Right
its
on the edge of
22nd
22.
anniversary.
Hey,
Yay. But they're
well,
great. They're really good. They let me do what I want. They never. People always say, "Well, how did you convince Dark Horse to let you do a comic with like a giant jellyfish and a little baby man kind of a thing?" And blah blah blah. I said, I didn't. They just print it. I sent it to them. I've never had them go. Or maybe I say that and knock on wood. They'll go, this is it. That's it, Daryl. We had it with you. You're a pain in the ass as it is. So
well, it's worked out so far. We can only hope that
the key
everything
words
goes.
being so far.
Yeah, ellipses, and we'll see what happens after that.
Yes.
Well, Geof, thank you so much for taking all this time with me today. I really appreciate it. Where can we send fans to follow you online,
I
social
don't do much
media?
social media. I'm on Facebook.
Okay.
There's a Geof Darrow thing on Facebook, but I don't, I'm so easily distracted that I even know, like, I know certain artists, like, how do they find the time for this stuff?
Yeah.
Every day they have a posting about this artist or that artist. I mean, what do I know? I mean, and I think about it. Well, maybe I should write something about this or
Well, then you're running the risk of more people coming out and asking you questions about why not this or why
well,
not
they do
that.
anyway. I mean, they'll send me messages and, you know, how come you don't do a team up with, you
X, Y, and Z. Yeah, I'm sure you've been pitched
Oh no, I've never, I don't think,
thousands of team ups.
I don't think the closest we came, I was going to do the Shaolin Cowboy Hellboy. It was going to be there. They were going to be in hell, and we were like, oh yeah. Then I actually started storyboarding it, and thinking, and all I could do is his world is so particular that
Yes.
I found myself starting to think about how would he draw this, which is not a good thing because I'm not Mike Mignola. And like a day or two later, he calls. He goes, "Hey Jeff, I've been thinking about it," and I was like, "Yeah, it's probably not a good idea."
Yeah.
Although Hellboy has showed up twice in Shaolin Cowboy.
Well, there you
He's on
go.
a little. He's on
Yeah,
somebody's telephone
little
on a
cameos.
YouTube thing. Yeah, very small, but I
Yeah.
think he's in there twice. Yeah, the big guy shows up. The big guy shows up in one. In the last
Right.
one, he's at least his ship is flying by, for me that world's totally interconnected. I wanted to do and Frank probably wouldn't let me. I wanted to do a Nixon versus Shaolin Cowboy, but I thought he'd let me do it.
Never know.
Yeah, yeah.
One day. Well, if we ever talk to Frank, I'll ask him. We'll put a little bit of a push on the Nixon
Well,
versus Shaolin
I
Cowboy.
asked his producer, and she said I could, but I don't know. I don't, because I always had an idea. I always thought that the robots would eventually become kind of phased out, and he would end up, somewhere for some criminal, being like they've wiped his memory. He's like working as a bouncer in some place, and eventually, like he gets, albeit, and suddenly all his memories start coming back, and he wants to get back to his family, and he's killing all these people. I actually wanted to do the other thing I did in Frank, the Dark Horse. Said, let's do Nixon versus aliens because they're doing aliens versus everything. It's Superman. I go, except he's up there on that ship. He's up on the alien ship, and he's the alien. Like they want to get
That's
rid of
right.
him because he's kicking the shit out of all of them, and he ends up getting like, jettisoned out in his face. But anyway, no, no, Jeff.
Well, keep pitching.
Better heads prevailed.
Well, I for one would like to see it, but so I encourage you to keep pitching, and you never know. We'll see what we can see. And we're back. Thank you, Jeff, for being part of the show. Thank you for sharing all of your insights and more about the Shaolin Cowboy. We're looking forward to that hardcover. I know you have at least one customer, and that is me, that will be buying that. Everybody out there, thank you for listening. Thank you for viewing. Thank you for doing that all year in 2025. We do have one more episode, but I wanted to express our appreciation for all that you do to support the show. That includes rating, reviewing, subscribing, and getting on our Patreon, Dollar Bin Boosters. So thank you again. Thank you, Jeff, for being here. One more episode to go until 2026. So we'll see you next issue.